So for the sermon slot, 3 cheers. You don't have to listen to me all the way through today, but we've got 3 of our members of the Tuesday afternoon group who are going to tell us a little bit about their story. And I'm sure it'll bless you as we work through these. So Heather and John, please. I think by now most of you will know Heather and John. Do you want to have a little perch? There we are. Oh, I'm losing things. Thank you. I'll be looking for that. Thank you very much. So if you haven't managed to speak to Heather and John, you can guess which one's which, I'm sure. And how long have you been at St Wilfrid's now, you two?
We've been at St Wilfrid's now for about 2 years. We came during COVID when we were looking for a new direction in our church life, as we felt we were in a sort of wilderness situation. And the welcome we received from everyone was amazing. And we felt that we really belonged here and decided this was where we should continue to worship.
And we're all really pleased about that. It's lovely to have you both as part of our fellowship. Now, John, I think you're going to tell us a little bit about a big change that you two made, kind of midlife, didn't you? Are you hearing okay? Yes, you're catching it.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, we both had a Christian upbringing and felt that God was always there in the background, but not really playing an active part in our lives. It was when I was threatened with being made redundant from my job in electronics in Bradford that we were led to thinking about our way forward. I was undecided whether we should move to London, where my job had been relocated, or taking redundancy.
Right. So then you'd got that opportunity now where something was going to change, but which way was it going to do?
Well, after a phone call from a Christian friend who said that he would pray for us about it, the following day I had a vision that we should start our own business by establishing a nursing home, using Heather's expertise as a registered nurse. Heather was somewhat apprehensive and amazed, but agreed on the understanding that would be a home with Christian love and values. We both agreed and were encouraged by people's reaction to it and decided to take redundancy and remain in Yorkshire.
For which we are very glad. But this is a big thought coming out of nowhere, isn't it? This kind of sense that you had of God urging you in this direction. So there's one big question. We can all have big ideas, but how was it financed? How did that? Yeah. It's not peanuts, is it? This sort of finance that's needed.
Well, initially we got to find a suitable property. We went on a business course, so that when we eventually found a suitable home for conversion in Pudsey, we were able to draw up a business plan and present it to our bank manager. We had to sell our house in Clayton and use the redundancy money and secure a large loan so that we were able to move into the grounds of what was now called Radcliffe Gardens in our touring caravan. While the conversion took place, which took about 6 months, our boys slept in the summer house and all our furniture was held in 4 garages in the grounds. Fortunately, I was offered my old job back on a part-time basis in London, which brought in some much-needed income.
Brilliant. There you go. Living in a touring caravan in the grounds, putting the kids all in different sheds to sleep, stuff in the garden sheds to sleep. You wouldn't have dreamt of that, would you, at some point? If I can add just one little thing, I remember you saying that at some point was it the rates people came and actually measured the size of their awning on the touring caravan.
For council tax.
Get every penny they could out of them. Right. Well, I know there were so many more steps, and this is a huge story, and there's many more details of God's leading in various ways. But whilst these things were going on, Heather, what did you do to prepare yourself?
Yeah, I began working in a nursing home in Bradford to find out what it was all about, how to run a home, as I'd only previously worked in hospitals. And it was a real steep learning curve as to what to do and what not to do.
Yeah, sometimes the what not to do can be as useful as the what to do when we're learning something new, can't it? So let's skip all the other steps of finance and work and planning that you had to do. And can I ask you, when it was all ready, how did you feel on day one?
Well, as it happened, day one was February the 23rd, which was my 45th birthday, which was when all the necessary health authority registration and all the documentations were completed. So we ticked all the boxes. We were both very nervous, but I had been encouraged by so many requests for a place in the home, and were able to fill the 12 beds straight away. The first lady to arrive was Marjorie, who Heather had become involved with at the nursing home where she had worked in Bradford, and I managed to bring her over in my car.
We're going to hear a little bit more about Marjorie in a minute. But to both of you, getting the right staff was absolutely key to you being able to run this care home that later became a nursing home in a distinctly Christian way. You've got to have the right staff. How did you do that?
Well, we're very fortunate because we had a wonderful group of staff, and they were all attracted by one advert in the local Parish Church magazine. So apart from, I think, a cook who we couldn't get for one or two of the shifts, many of the staff were still with us after 20 years when we retired.
That's amazing, isn't it?
So we're pleased about that.
And these sort of coincidences become God incidences, don't they? When so many things start coming together. But let's just go back to Marjorie. I remember you telling me the first death in the home was very significant for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, Marjorie was the first lady that we actually admitted in the home, and she'd actually previously come from Pudsey, and she'd been involved very much with Pudsey Parish Church. And while she was in the other home, she'd lost her faith. And then over the months, she was with us. She had regained her faith, and we were able to get her over to the church in a wheelchair. And Marjorie had become a really dear friend to me. And one night, in the middle of the night when I was alone, the nurse on duty rang me from my bed to see her as she becomes seriously ill. And I took her by the hand, and she said that she was just so happy and had no fears at all, and everything was going to be just fine. And she just told me, go back to bed. And I said my goodbye to her, and I knew everything was in control. And then shortly after I got back to bed and prayed for Marjorie, the most amazing thing happened. The bedroom was filled with the most brilliant brightness that I'd ever experienced, and I felt an amazing peace. And I found out it was at the exact time that Marjorie had passed away. And I knew for certain that she'd gone to be with the Lord. The other significant thing was that Marjorie's bedroom was where then our vicar, the Reverend John Waller, had blessed the home the week before we had actually opened.
It's amazing, isn't it? Just having our hearts open, how much God can reassure us and confirm things to us. So, both of you, looking back now, you're some years away from it. You've been retired for how many years?
16 years.
16, been retired for 16 years. Gosh, they're looking good, aren't they? So, looking back, how do you feel about it now?
Well, we were just amazed how we're given the strength and ability to have our own nursing home. But like all businesses, it had its ups and downs. but we were able to develop the home to provide 20 nursing and palliative care beds, and we were rewarded with being able to care for so many people for 20 years.
So many happy memories we shared and so many friendships have been formed with both our staff and relatives. And we know we are never taken beyond what we can achieve by God's help. And taking that step in faith is truly amazing.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely. I'm sure you've been blessed listening to what they've got to say. And thank you for being willing to share it for us. Alan is going to come and just share some thoughts. I've just dropped the spontaneous questions on the floor. Thanks, Alan. Right. Thanks, Alan.
Where am I sitting?
Wherever you want, just there. Do you want to get the mic out? Just pull it out. Yeah. You okay? Just hold it. And John, can you do it? That's it. We've got it. We've got it. It's always the technology, isn't it? At our age, it's always the technology. Right. Well, Alan, you've heard that story, and you've got quite a different story. Just tell us, how long have you and Eunice now been at St Wilf's?
8 years.
8 years.
Is it?
And you moved here from?
Solihull, Birmingham.
From
I worked in
Birmingham.
Birmingham and eventually we lived in Solihull. We made it.
And we're really blessed as a church to have Alan and Eunice as part of our fellowship, and particularly Alan with the musical gifts that he had. So, Alan, you're not a born and bred Yorkshire man, are you? Just tell us a little bit about, your past and where you've been, just briefly.
Well, I was born in Carlisle, where when I was, my dad was an engine driver and my mother, fortunately, was a dressmaker. And when I was 8, I was the last, I was the baby, I was the favorite, everybody was. And during the war, my eldest brother was in the RAF in Canada, and my two sisters, Margaret was working at the time, Willie, my other brother, didn't do anything, and Jean and I were still at school. And when I was 8, my dad died.
Right, thank you. So, you're not born and bred Yorkshire. We can forgive you for that. You're very welcome anyway. I'm not brought up Yorkshire, but I was born Yorkshire. So
I used to despise Yorkshire people.
Thank you. I love you too, Alan. Don't forget.
Not now.
Don't forget we used to live over in Lancashire. You all know about that border dispute, don't you? But neither were you born in Yorkshire, but you weren't brought up C of E, were you?
No, Carlisle it had been the southern terminus of the Caledonian Railway, and so both my mother and my father were brought up in Caledonian buildings, which was a tenement built for the rail workers. So we were a railway community, and with a high percentage of Scots. So we went to the Church of Scotland, which was quite dour. And later on, when I was a youth, I went back, and they had a very good youth group with lots of nice girls and a drama
As always.
group.
But you became not a pop group man, but you became a chorister, didn't you? Church of England chorister.
Later on, when I went to the grammar school, the choir master there, or the music teacher, he looked out for likely lads and invited me to sing in St Cuthbert's Church Choir, which was quite a big choir. Tell
them how much you earned for doing that.
Well, when I started, it was £6 a month, and 2 and 6 for weddings and a shilling for funerals.
Oh.
But when I became head choir boy, I was on the princely sum of 2 shillings and 6pence
Whoa,
a month.
you're rolling in it, weren't you?
Yeah.
Isn't it funny how those things change, the amount of money? Right. There's something you told me about what your mum said at one of your first times you sang with the Anglican choir as a chorister.
Well, it was a very big choir, and we used to do all the oratorios, and we were doing the Messiah, and we had some of the most eminent soloists in the country at the time, Kathleen Ferrier and Hedel Nash and just Joan Cross and Arthur Pizet, and we had a huge orchestra and with lots of trumpets, and it was a really great sound. And my mother was always my most ardent supporter. She came to everything I did and thought it was wonderful. And when we got home after the performance, we went in and my 2 sisters said, "Well, how did it go?" And my mother said, "It was wonderful. You could hear our Alan above everybody else." And of course, my sister said, "You're not supposed to hear our Alan. He should blend in with the others."
That's real mum love, isn't it? Hey? Well, let's move on now. Thank you for that, Alan. And you then, later in life, you got involved in both the Duke of Edinburgh Award and Boys Brigade. Can you tell us briefly about that,
Yes,
Alan?
I'd been a member of the Boys Brigade from the junior section at 8 years old, and went right through the ranks and became an officer, and did all the sort of things that one normally does in these things, and took classes for the kids, and first aid, slings and head bandages and all the rest. And but in the early 1950s, I think it was, the Duke of Edinburgh's Award came in, and the bit that really appealed to me was expeditions. So I used to run the expedition classes, and then in 1959 I moved into and I took training courses and things, and in 1959 I moved into the Birmingham area to teach in a technical college, and got involved with the BB again, and I found out that I knew more about things than the people there did. So I was chairman of the expedition committee, and we spent a lot of outdoor time training and testing instructors and children, and then we started running adventure camps, and this is when it really took off. The kids could do canoeing or sailing or rock climbing, and we had a wonderful spirit. And the song that we sang a lot, and the song that really signified or sort of encompassed the whole thing was When I Needed, came along about the same time. When I needed a neighbor, were you there? Were you there? When I needed a neighbor, were you there? And the creed and the color and the creed and the color and the name won't matter. Were you there? And it goes on. I was hungry and thirsty. Yeah. Were you there? I was cold and naked. Were you there? When I needed a shelter, were you there? When I needed. What's the next
Whatever
one?
It is.
And it finishes off.
So Alan, what did all this do for your own spiritual life? All this responsibility, all this extra work you had to do. What did it do for you spiritually?
Well, I must say that it made Eunice bring the family up, but because I was away with other people's children quite a lot at the time, and but it gave me, in the last line, which I didn't get out there. Sorry. When I needed in the last verse. I
can't help you. Just go on from it. So you were telling me, Alan, that this whole connection of learning that Christianity is more than going to church on Sunday.
Well, I
that
think
this really grew and became a big part of your spiritual life.
I felt going to church was one of the least. You know, you've got to live Christianity rather than just talk about it. And
Alan said on Tuesday, going to church then was one of the most boring bits of being a Christian.
But you know, in the last verse of the, I used to play the guitar, and all the kids would sit round at Bible class, and we would sing away, and at the end of the song is I'll be there, I'll be there, I'll be there, and this is when I was there. And of course the kids, you know, some of the cynics used to roll their eyes and look at me as if I was thinking I was carrying glitter, and I certainly wasn't. Anyway, I think that's enough.
No, just one more thing, Alan. But when we were talking, Alan brought out very beautifully about how the whole idea of service became a big part of his understanding of spiritual life. And I just wonder, briefly, one last thing, Alan. Do you have any insight that you could offer anyone now wondering if they could take up a leadership role in the church or maybe in a church-linked community?
Well, I think it makes our Christian service more meaningful if we're part. You know, we say we come to, what's the church name?
St. Wilfrid's.
St. Wilfrid's. When we come to St. Wilfrid's, then we ought to be all working in some way to be involved in the church and support it. Amen.
So it's about everybody finding their own way of serving.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Alan. That was great. Now we have one final contribution for us today, and I know you'll be very blessed by this, and I'm not going to interrupt June. She's going to just tell us a bit of her story herself. Thanks, June. Oh, can you push that back in? Are you okay to do that? And then you can just push it in the holder. That's it. Brilliant. Thank you.
Hi.
Thanks, June.
We've just been singing about the steps along life's way. What can I say about that? For me, it's the old lady stage. I wouldn't say that normally, but there we are. First and foremost, I'm so blessed to have reached here, to be surrounded by nature's beauty, a lovely family, children, grandchildren, and now even great-grandchildren. To be able to wonder what exciting things the world will hold for them. Experience has showed me that there will be bumps along the way. There is for everyone. God gives strength to deal with them if you ask him. And it's by experiencing the bumps that you really appreciate the happiness. Watching the funeral of our late Queen and hearing about the constancy of her marriage to the Duke of Edinburgh reminded me of our marriage. I met Alan when I was 17 and he was 20. We were in the young people's nativity play at St. Michael's Church, Old Farnley. He was a shepherd and I a completely frozen angel. No eating in the church that cold December night. He asked how I was coping with the cold and could he walk me home to Bramley. What a long way compared with the distances we walk these days. About 18 months after that, we got engaged. Some people today would say that was too young to make a commitment, but time would have proved them wrong. It was just before the coronation. Conscription into the forces was still going on at the time. At 18 years old, young men had to do 2 years national service. Because Alan had signed an apprenticeship agreement, he was deferred until 21. Just after his 21st birthday, he received his calling up papers to report to HMS Collingwood, Portsmouth, the day after the coronation. He left by train that night. When he returned 2 years later, we intended to get married. Preparations were made. But along with all the excitement came one of the first major bumps in the road. My mother died suddenly and unexpectedly. Dates were set and arrangements made. I was an only child and was absolutely desolated. The date of our marriage was 6 months ahead. I found I could not even think of leaving Dad alone at that time. However, my very wise grandmother took me to task and said if I stayed at home with him, he would probably never take hold of life again. Yeah. And at his age, only 48, he had a lot more living to do. Reluctantly, we went ahead. This was the beginning of 58 years of truly happy married life. I have related all this because I have been asked by older people how you deal with the loss of a partner. Can be a frightening thing to anticipate. It's 10 years this New Year's Eve that my wonderful husband died after a very long illness which we faced together. He was nursed and died at home after a very long illness which we faced together. We had talked about this happening over the years, that question, who would go first? One morning, not long before he died, I had to get up once more in an unending night, feeling unbelievably tired and depressed. It was just as dawn was breaking. I had reached rock bottom at this moment, questioning everything. I was standing by his bed and prayed for God's help. I remember saying to God, I don't think I can do this anymore, Lord. Thy will be done. This was immediately followed by a feeling of betrayal, both of Alan and God. Almost at once, I felt all the weight lifted from me, and I was surrounded by a lovely, peaceful, warm sensation. I knew that God was with me. Alan died peacefully about 3 weeks after that. The carers who came to our home, sometimes 4 times a day, insisted that I was a very strong person. But I know this was not me. It was our faith that carried us through and continues now. Since Alan's death, I have been embraced by all my friends at church, friends of no faith, and can honestly say, I have been very happy. Put your trust in God. I consider I have been blessed in life. I don't normally talk about this, but if it helps just one person, it will be good.
Thank you so much, June, for sharing that. June was quite anxious about sharing it because she didn't want it to be dismal, but it's true, isn't it? And it's, we all have at times to face losses, don't we? And thank you so, so much for reminding us that it hurts, but that we can be happy again afterwards, in due course, with God's strength. I've done some thoughts for the going deeper sheet. If you want to, there's thoughts that you can take forward from each of the 3 stories that people have shared with us together today. So thank you so much. And we pray that God will go on blessing those thoughts you've shared with us in our hearts. Thank you.